Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. I hope you're doing so well today. In today's video we're going to be talking all about classics, and specifically the classics that are on my bucket list, or the classics that I really want to get to in my lifetime. These are not specifically classics that I want to read this year or right now, but they're classics that I really want to be able to have said that I've read them and to be able to contribute when talking about these books. So some of them are a little bit more of a challenging read, and the reason I've not got to them before now is because I find them slightly intimidating. Some of them are books that I've had on my shelf for quite a few years and I've just never picked them up for whatever reason. And some of them are books that I've tried to read and just never been able to get myself the whole way through, but years have passed since I've tried to read them, so I feel like I need to try them again now. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Go and grab yourself a comforting warm drink and let's get on with the video. Let's talk about the classics that I really want to read in my lifetime. So the first one that I have here is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I actually recently read Jane Eyre for the first time. I say for the first time, I had tried to read it several times before, but I finished it for the first time recently, and it's made me very excited to read some of the other Bronte books. And I think there's a bit of a split between people who find Jane Eyre to be their favourite and people who find Wuthering Heights to be their favourite. And because I loved Jane Eyre so much, I feel like I'm probably going to be in the Jane Eyre camp, but I also feel like I need to read this book to be able to say that with conviction. And also because I feel like it's definitely a book that I will enjoy. Yeah, I don't really know much about it, and I haven't watched any adaptations of Wuthering Heights, and I think I'm going to keep it that way so that I can fully enjoy Wuthering Heights to its maximum capacity. So this is one that I really want to read in my lifetime, and perhaps one that I will actually get to this year. And whilst we're talking about Bronte books, I also really want to read The Tenants of Wildfowl by Anne Bronte. This is one of the more underrated ones, I think. I don't hear many people hype this one up, but the people that do love it really love it and will call it an underrated book. So that makes me really intrigued, because I tend to find that I'm a fan of the underrated books that not everybody else loves. So I think maybe this will be one I enjoy. Again, I don't know a whole lot about it other than I think it's about a woman who leaves her marriage, which is obviously quite a huge topic given the time period that this book was written in, and it's been hailed as quite a feminist and progressive piece of fiction for the time period. So this is another one on my to read list as a result of loving Jane Eyre so much. I also got these Penguin cloth-bound editions of 4 books by the Bronte sisters, and they've been sitting on my shelf for a good couple of years now, and I feel like it's time to really delve into them over the next couple of years. The next book I'm not going to actually get down because it's in a big heavy bind up of books, but that is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Now, I know I've mentioned in previous videos that I have read Pride and Prejudice, however, I haven't actually ever finished it. So even though I've read it, I will gladly say that I have read Pride and Prejudice, but I've never completed the book. I read it a long time ago, probably when I was about 12 or 13, and I just didn't get it. I couldn't get into the writing style, I couldn't get the story, I just didn't really enjoy it that much. I was just all about the Keira Knightley movie adaptation, to be honest, and the book did not live in my brain like that movie did, and so I kind of gave up on reading it probably about halfway through the book. However, I've recently read Persuasion by Jane Austen because I wanted to kind of see if I did enjoy Jane Austen's works now that I'm a little bit older, and I did. I really enjoyed Persuasion. I think I still had some of the same kind of issues as I did with Pride and Prejudice, but I did enjoy it a lot more and found it a lot easier to read now. So I think I'm probably at a stage where it's time to reread Pride and Prejudice again. I feel like it's one of the most recommended classics, and I feel like I'm missing out by not being able to say that I have completed this book. So if you don't know what Pride and Prejudice is about, it's about Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy, who are very much opposed to each other. Elizabeth is very opinionated and very proud, and Mr. Darcy is very prejudiced, or maybe it's the other way round, or maybe they're both. I actually don't remember. It is, of course, one of the most famous period romance stories, so I feel like it's definitely one that I want to read in my lifetime. I would also really like to read Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. Kind of similarly to Pride and Prejudice, I feel like this is one that's always in those most recommended classics videos and lists. And I don't know why I've never read it, because it definitely feels like something I would enjoy, and I'm potentially thinking about reading it for the first time this coming Christmas. I feel like it seems like a very Christmassy kind of book, so I'm maybe going to try and read it this Christmas. I don't really know what's put me off, however, I have resisted the urge to watch the movie adaptation, which everybody seems to love so much. I actually started watching it last Christmas and stopped myself because I really don't want to have the story ruined. I really don't know the plotline of Little Women very well, only very vaguely, and I just love being able to go into classics not really knowing anything about it and enjoying it completely from a fresh pair of eyes, and then going into the movie adaptations afterwards. So I read The Hunchback of Notre Dame by Victor Hugo maybe about 3 years now, and that had been one of the books, maybe the top book on my bucket list of books to read in my lifetime for a long time. And it had always intimidated me because it was a fairly big book. It's translated from French. There are so many translations of the book and people have different opinions on the different translations, and I just kind of put it off for a really long time. However, I read it, I found a good translation, and I really enjoyed it. It wasn't the easiest book to read, but it was not as hard as I thought it would be, and it was a lot more gripping and enjoyable than I thought it would be, definitely. And so I feel like now that I have accomplished The Hunchback of Notre Dame, I really want to read Les Miserables, also by Victor Hugo. That's not how you pronounce it. Les Mis, we're gonna go with Les Mis because I can pronounce that. Yes, also by Victor Hugo, which is of course a huge book. It is an absolute tome to read, and just like my concerns about reading The Hunchback of Notre Dame, I feel quite intimidated by the thought of reading it. I'm scared I'm just not going to get into it and I'm not going to find it really engaging, and it's going to be hard to get through. However, I'm hoping that, like The Hunchback of Notre Dame, it will surprise me a lot. So that is a book that I feel I really want to read in my lifetime, and definitely will be a big achievement book to read. The 6th book on this list is 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. This is a book I've had on my shelf only for a couple of years now, and I want to read this book because it is kind of known as where the genre of magical realism originated, and I feel quite challenged that I say I love magical realism as a genre and have read quite a few books within that genre, and yet I haven't read the kind of cultural background of it. I haven't understood and immersed myself in where all of that came from and its origins. So this is a book I want to read so that I can understand and educate myself in where this genre kind of blossomed from. The reason I haven't got to this book is because it intimidates me, and that is because it doesn't look huge, but I get the impression it will be one that's really long to read. It's a generational family epic drama, so there's lots of characters, takes place over 100 years, and there are a lot of characters. Actually, in the beginning of the book, there is a family tree. There's a family tree, and loads of the characters have the same name, And I just know I'm going to get so confused, and I think it's going to be one that I maybe need to annotate as I go through and almost study. So that's kind of what's put me off, is that I know it'll be a bit of a time and brain commitment, and at the moment when I'm sitting down to read, it's often when I really want to shut my brain down for a bit. And so I don't know when I'm going to get to this book, but it's definitely one that I do want to read. The next book is To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. And this is a really interesting one, because the reason I've wanted to read this one for a long time is because I did one of those quizzes years ago. You know, those Facebook quizzes where it tells you something about your personality, or like what burger defines your personality, or you know, that sort of thing. Well, I did a quiz on which book suits your personality the best, and the book it suggested for me was To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. Now, I haven't read the book, I don't know a whole lot about it, but I'm intrigued to see why it thinks that my personality is suited to that book, because it sounds like it's quite a depressing and difficult read. So I don't know if that defines me at all, but I'm really intrigued to read it just to discover this story. Again, I get the impression it would be a bit of a challenging read and one I want to take my time over, despite it not being a really long book. And so that's sort of what stopped me from ever picking it up. But it's very beloved and has had a big impact on a lot of people, and so I feel like it's one I need to get to. The next one is slightly embarrassing. The Return of the King by J.R.R. Tolkien. So I have mentioned before on this channel that I've never actually finished all of the Lord of the Rings, and I love The Hobbit. I absolutely adore The Hobbit, the book. I adore the Lord of the Rings movies, but I've just struggled to ever finish these books, and I don't know what it is about them, but by the time I got to The Two Towers, the second volume, part, whatever you call it, I was so exhausted from reading it, and I think that's just stopped me from ever getting to this one, particularly now because I feel like I do need to start them all again because it's been so long. But I really want to be able to say I have read all of the Lord of the Rings, and again, I tried to read these when I was a lot younger, and maybe now that I'm a bit older I will enjoy them more. Then we have North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. And this is one, again, I've had on my shelves for a really long time, and I bought it because I watched and loved the BBC movie adaptation. I haven't watched it in a while, but I went through a phase where I watched it like every week on repeat. I loved it so much, and I feel like I will love the book. It has a lot of themes that I personally find really interesting. It's set in a time of history that I find really interesting, and the romance is very kind of delicate and gradual, which is my favourite kind of romance in a story. We follow a lady called Margaret Hale, and we follow her family as her father leaves the church after having a crisis of conscience about a decision that is made by the church hierarchy. And to me, that is just such an interesting thing to explore, and I don't think the TV show massively explored that theme. It was just kind of dropped in there, but I feel like the book will hopefully unpack that a little bit more. I love the story anyway, I love the adaptation, and it's one that I think I might try and get to this year actually. From this list, this is probably the one I'm gonna get to first out of all of these books. I said that about Wuthering Heights, but maybe North and South is actually the next one. And the final book on this list is The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. I absolutely adore The Phantom of the Opera, the musical. I went to go and see the musical in the West End for my 21st birthday, I think, and I fell in love with it. And of course, I've also watched the movie adaptation, which is one of my favourite things. And I've never read the book. I feel like recently, over the last couple of years, I've gone through a bit of a thing of wanting to read the original books of the stories that I've grown up loving. And I think that started with the Hunchback of Notre. That was probably like in my top 3 movies. As a kid, I loved watching it, and as a result, I always had this desire to read the original story. And I think reading that ended up fueling this kind of drive to read the originals of my favourite stories. And so that's why the Phantom of the Opera is on here as well. The only problem I have is that every time I think about the Phantom of the Opera, just the words, I sing the song in my head, and I'm scared that I'm just going to read the whole book singing the songs in my head. But, you know, then it will just be an excuse to watch the movie again, so I think that'll be okay. So those are 10 of the books that are at the top of my classics to read lists. Let me know if you've read any of the books on this list. Which ones should I prioritise? Which ones should I get to first? And which classic is at the top of your to read list right now? Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you very soon with another video.